And welcome to Eye on the Illini Live. We have got a full stack of everybody here. We got Ted Prince, Steve Sturm. We're going to have more people come on. This is Mike Kegley. Wanted to look at what we've got going on here. Of course, you are listening to Illini Central Postgame, Eye on the Illini Live, brought to you by DraftKings. And folks, before we get started, DraftKings Sportsbook, which is America's top rated sportsbook app, is coming soon to the Show Me State. So if you're listening to us from Missouri, you can actually sign up today. New Missouri customers can get $300 in bonus bets when you launch on December 1st. Download now and place a $5 bet when we go live. DraftKings Sportsbook brings everything to elevate your game. In-game betting, lightning fast payouts, endless ways to get in on the action, all right from your phone. And when they go live in Missouri, you'll be betting with the Sportsbook app trusted by millions. Safe, secure, fast money withdrawals. So download DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use the code STL Sports to grab $300 in bonus bets with just a $5 bet when you go live on December 1st. That's code STL Sports in partnership with DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problems, call 1-800-GAMBLER, 21 plus, physically present in Missouri. Eligibility and restrictions apply. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Exclude customers who redeem pre-launch sign-up offer. Terms at sportsbook.com, DraftKings.com/promos. All right, guys, so let's get rocking and rolling on this. Ked, we saw a team that was had negative 29 yards rushing, ending up at 123. What the heck happened in the second half?
Well, they got Barry Lunny Jr., if that make any sense. To me, what an adjustment. I talked about it at halftime, and I said it, they have to make adjustments. And I'm going to tell you what, it's nice to see Brett Bielema do what he did. I mean, he's typically a run the football type of guy. Duke took that away from them. Duke took that away, and they threw the football. And to me, it's about getting a win. I don't care if you throw it 75,000 times and you run it 6. You get the win. And you saw what happened when they threw the ball down the field. They made adjustments. And what they didn't do as well, they didn't drop back and try to throw the ball 60 yards. Those slant routes and the receivers ran really good routes today. And it just opened up the rest of the game for them, I think. I just was impressed with this offensive play calling. And, I mean, to me, the show just started, but there's a lot to unpack and a lot of players to talk about. But to me, this game, there was a game ball, it goes to him. A lot of people, they want to give it to Luke, and I understand that. But the way they adjusted in the second half and got the ball down the field, it just took all the win out of Duke.
Steve, as you look at this game, one of the things that I can't help but think about is Brett Bielema and Brad Underwood both talk about how it's great to be old and stay old. Did we see a difference between a young team and an old team? Obviously, that may not be all of it, but what were you thinking, in terms of how that played out?
I've said it again and again. The key to college sports, and especially college football, the secret sauce is maturity. It is. Like any 22-year-old 3-star is going to beat an 18-year-old 4-star. It's just going to happen. And it's not just going to, obviously speed, skill is a factor. But when you've played more, about being able to come from behind and punch the ball out. About being able to look for that punch out from the other side. And even though Darian Mensah is an experienced quarterback, boy, he just looked like he had not played enough at this level, honestly. And I think he'll probably look like a whole lot better player at the end of the season than he does right now. But that looks very much like a guy who's only played a little bit at Boston College, had some time in Tulane to at least get his feet wet and show what he could do, and has just now been playing his first high major opponent. A couple of those punch outs toward the, both of those punch outs that he lost are just, basic plays that Luke Altmaier is actually, I'll take it back. Luke Altmaier is a sophomore, was losing the ball like that. Luke Altmaier is not going to lose the ball like that today because he's learned his lesson and he's experienced. And it wasn't, of course, just that. I mean, the line play was, really the difference in the game, in my opinion. The adjustments, Ked's not wrong. Like, the adjustments were a big part of it. You could see that early on, Duke appeared to be dominating the line play on both sides of the ball. And then Illinois kind of tightened it up on defense. And I mean that literally. They tightened up their splits on defense and brought in the linebackers. And then, to be stacked up behind the defensive linemen. And then on offense, they actually did a couple different things that I saw where they were using the tight ends differently to be able to take on like an outside defender, which allowed more double teams in the middle. I thought that was a big difference in the running game.
Yeah, I was impressed by the running game. Did we see something in both Ballantyne and Fagan this afternoon, Ked? They both had really good second half and key plays that made a difference in the game. What was your thoughts on the running backs and the way they kind of played? Of course, you got to give some of the credit to the line, but how the running backs ran the ball in the second half.
They ran the ball in the second half because they threw it. I'm sorry. They threw the ball and they took some of the pressure up front. It was nice. We covered the University of Illinois, so we know what the running back room looks like. There's talent. You got the incredible Hulk back there with Caden Fagan, and we know that he looked a step slow in the first half trying to get to the line, but I thought a lot of that, trying to get to the holes, but I thought a lot of that had to do with Duke's pressure up front. That's my personal opinion. And then, Ballantyne is just that speed guy. I mean, and he can read holes and he's quicker, getting off the block. If they would have threw the ball right there in the first half, this could have been a 45-point win easily. But Illinois didn't do that. They made those adjustments. But the running game, to answer your question, my personal opinion, I know how good they are, and I just like the adjustments that were made so they could run the ball the second half, and they wore them down. Duke was expecting the pass, and sometimes people say you run the ball to make the pass, and this time they didn't. It was the opposite. That's why I like what Lunny did. They relieved pressure, and the running backs were effective the second half.
Yeah. One of the things, Larry Smith, of course, one of the Illini guys, and he's our resident historian. He noted that this 45-19 win was the first non-conference double-digit road win since Illinois beat Syracuse in 2007. So that is, you talk about something. There might be a freshman or two who weren't alive when that happened. So that's a pretty impressive stat there. Steve, can you talk a little bit about what maybe the offensive line did a little differently in the second half that you saw? And of course, for those people who are tuning into the Illini guys and STL Sports Central for the first time, Steve did play offensive line in college. His claim to fame was he never gave up a sack. So Steve, tell us a little bit about what you saw that maybe fans didn't see as much of.
Sure. And I also have to qualify this. I was never called for holding, but I held a lot. Regardless, I mentioned earlier I was impressed by like the set of double teams that I thought really opened up the running lanes, and what Illinois was doing in particular. It's unfortunately it wasn't really the offensive line that was doing it. Tanner Arkin and the other tight ends were actually being called upon to take on edge rushers an awful lot, like in the running game. They were either doing wham blocks or they were lining up on the line and having sole responsibility for the edge rushers. Duke is a little bit lighter on the defensive line than anybody you're going to see in the Big Ten. So they were able to handle that. So first of all, let me take a step back. That's what was troubling Illinois early on. They had a lot of quick guys who were getting penetration. And so like the classic power running game that Illinois likes to use wasn't working. There was getting a lot of penetration. We saw a couple negative plays and we saw a couple disrupted plays, which unfortunately it's kind of crazy to think about. Caden Fagan is not actually a great power back as far as like a between the guards kind of a guy. He's a build up kind of a back. So he's way better off tackle. And that means you need actually to be able to hold the center and then also be able to create a hole like off tackle, or at least between the guard and tackle for him. So what I saw that worked better in the second half is I saw the tight ends taking on personal responsibility for some of the edge defenders, and then that allowed double teams that not only created holes, but also got to the second level. Sometimes you could see a couple of combo blocks where a center guard would take on a defensive tackle, and then it allowed one of them to be able to leak out and obstruct, if not completely block the linebacker. So that's what I saw that was working best.
Yeah, and it was an interesting. One of the things I also think about is, comparing the coaching staff. You have to give the coaching staff, as Ken talked about, some credit for the adjustments that were made at the half, and you also have to look at the other side and say, well, maybe our guys out schemed the other guys. But one of the things I wanted to talk about before we move on is Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal online data at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everybody vulnerable. Now, what do data brokers do? Well, your name, your contact info, your social security number, home address, even information about your family members can be compiled by data brokers and then sold online. So, have you ever been a victim of identity theft, harassment, doxing? If you haven't, you probably know someone who has. Delete Me can help. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me, now at a special discount rate for our listeners. Today, get 20% off of your Delete Me plan by texting HIT to 64000. The only way to get 20% off is to hit 6400 and put in the text HIT. HIT to 64,000. Message and data rates may apply. Okay, Ked, so as we are looking at this, we're going to hear a ton about how Darian Mensah threw for 334 yards, had a couple touchdown passes. But when you look at Luke Altmaier with 3 touchdown passes, no turnovers, he fought through 4 sacks in the first half, was only sacked 1 time in the second half. What are your thoughts on Luke, how he really took there was a lot of reasons he could have went in and had a very frustrating halftime and second half. Somehow he just kind of came out and it was a new game and everything seemed to work fine. What are your thoughts on Mr. Altmaier?
Luke did exactly what we all thought he was going to do in the preseason. He looked like a seasoned veteran. He took command in the second half. And the thing that I guess that was probably one of the things that was impressive in the first half, he didn't get flustered. He didn't seem upset. The Luke Altmaier that we're used to seeing of old when he first got there sophomore season, he would show his emotion. Now he's calm and relaxed, and I like the fact that the coaches trust him to, change the plays. And he seemed, even in the first half, even in the game last week against Western Illinois, I thought he rushed some of his passes, and then tonight, this afternoon, he kind of missed some receivers, but in the second half, he caught fire. He looked like a seasoned veteran, one of the top quarterbacks in the country. He made plays. He put the ball in spots where only, the receiver could get the ball. One of the best, to me, passes that I saw the entire day was that pass to him to Justin Bowick. I don't know how he got the ball there, and Bowick put his toes on the ground to make that play. That's a veteran play, Mike, and that's the kind of play you want to see from a veteran receiver. So, and they protected him better the second half, and he had command of the offense. I just like his composure. If you have a guy like that that's not showing emotion, and the rest of the team feeds off that, I'm impressed with that. He was 464 yards away from having 300 yards, and he's just been really, really effective. And this is what we thought. This is what we thought from a local media standpoint and national media. They knew he's going to be good, and he's one of the top quarterbacks in the country.
Sturdy's on now. Hey, Brad, I got to be honest with you. Hank Beatty, he comes out with 128 yards receiving on 8 catches. Has that fantastic play where he lines up at quarterback, and that was give Barry Lunny Jr. the laurels for that. What a play call! But you get Beatty in the open field, 25-yard carry for a touchdown. Can you tell us a little bit about how Illinois is using him and just how he's doing? And for those people who don't know, Hank Beatty grew up thinking, can I be the next Brad Sturdy, another Rochester graduate?
No. Interestingly, he's obviously I've had Hank on the podcast a few times, but he's a great kid. But what I love, he's always been this way. He's always had this ability. I think now he's physically stronger, so he's able to take hits and fight through that. And so as I look at where they're using him, they're moving him around. He's lining up in the slot. They're putting him in the backfield. They lined him up at quarterback. Obviously, we're in Wildcat. Give different looks because he's the guy. I mean, you look at, so when you think about what Hank's done this year, he's been targeted 14 times, and he has 13 catches. That's a guy who gets open, right? And he makes catches, and he gets his hands on the ball. What I like, he's not like, I don't know what his straight line speed is. I know what he ran 100 meters in high school. He actually ran track to get faster, just so he could be faster. But I don't know what his straight line speed is. All I know is he's extremely shifty, and he has suddenness. His ability to change direction is very, very good. And I noticed that the first time I watched him play in high school. I was like, whoa, this dude can change directions quickly. So that's what he does.
You said he's not very trustworthy. He's kind of shifty.
Maybe that's it. Yeah, he's shifty. But I like the way they're using him. Give Barry Lunny a ton of credit for this game. There were so many great play calls that he took advantage of in that second half. I thought they were the adjustments they made at halftime. To be honest, outside of the roughing the passer, they could have been up 14-6 at halftime. And this game's not even close at that point. But you saw what I like is that, they didn't run the ball well. But again, I thought Duke lined up to stop the run, and Illinois runs, they were not going to let him run the ball. But then at the end of the game, guess what? They wore him down, and they were able to run the football. And that's Brett Bielemel's like, he was living the dream in that fourth quarter. I mean, that's his dream. Yeah,
it is. And Steve, you had some thoughts on how Illinois is using Beatty and maybe what that might be able to lead to.
Well, I feel bad. I sure hope that our future opponents aren't watching this podcast.
Everybody watches this
game,
podcast.
Are they? Because I mentioned last week that you're going to see Cole Rusk come onto the field and not be a part of the other team's game plan and catch touchdowns. And then it happened. I don't know what his snap count today was. I didn't see him on the field hardly at all. But what happened? He gets single coverage outside and he gets a touchdown. What I was going to say is, as soon as I saw Hank Beatty, in the Wildcat formation and go in motion there, I was like, well, this clearly they're going to let him throw out of this. It's at some point. Like, he's going to run if he's open. But later in the year, somebody's going to have seen this touchdown and not know that he played quarterback a great deal, like an actual throwing quarterback, great deal in high school. And he was pretty good at it. I mean, he was listed 5'11", but we all know that that's a generous 5'11". So you're not going to expect that out of him, but he can throw the ball pretty darn well, unless he's suffered a shoulder injury that I'm not aware of. So I would look for him to, probably, roll out of that same formation, and then he'll roll out to the right. And then all of a sudden you're going to see a touchdown. He actually had wide receivers down the field here today too, but he did the smart thing, which is, you got a broken field and you're Hank Beatty, you go ahead and run for the touchdown. Why risk it?
Yeah. I was going to say that would be a bridge too far if I had the ball out there in the open field.
I would have definitely thrown it.
Yeah. If you're Brad Sturdy, you throw it. If you're Hank Beatty,
certain. If I was back there, I don't think Kreutz would have snapped the ball, but that's just me. So we look at this receiving group, and Elzy was kind of saved from a potential fumble early on in the game. And folks, what you guys don't really know is that Ked was receiving all sorts of first aid, because when Malik Elzy has a rough time, Ked gets chest pains. But we had Bowick, who is becoming the big play guy. I thought Hudson Clement had one really nice catch out there. We saw Colin Dixon starting to basically get the ball more. And I got to be honest, in a goal line situation, I think you could put Cole Rusk out, split him out wide, and just throw the ball up, and nobody else is going to get it. So yeah, Steve, we're creating plays for country. But Ked, any thoughts on the Illinois receivers? And then guys jump in afterwards.
Well, I'm really happy for Cole Rusk from my alma mater, Rock Island Rocks. I'm excited for him. But the receiver room, Mike, let me backtrack. I'm a big Malik Elzy fan. I was a little bit I've said the politically correct word here, was disappointed when on that pass. And, I know Matt Stevens told us that, he got taken to the wheelchair for dropping the pass. But I think the kid is extremely talented. The receiving room, to me, I was really worried about. I just wasn't. From the start of the season, Dixon, to me, was a good receiver. Clement was a guy that came in with sure hands. I think Malik is talented. And Bailey is just working himself into some all Big Ten selection if he keeps this up. Because you talk about a guy, Brad mentioned how fast he is, but he runs really, really good routes. I don't think people understand how important that is. And he's open. And if he's open, and if teams are going to ever play zone against Illinois, Luke's going to carve him apart. So the receiving room is deep to me, and it's a nice thing to have because everybody was kind of concerned because you lost Pat Bryant last year and, to the NFL, to the Denver Broncos. So to me, I'm encouraged with them. The receiving room was good. I mean, I know you'll get to this later, but there was only probably, now that the game is over, probably one or two disappointments that I'm concerned about moving forward. But the receiving core, the running back room looks good to me. It was nice to see the offensive line, now that Luke Altmaier get taken to the hospital. They protected him better for the second half. So I was okay with that.
Any other thoughts on the receiving core, Brad or Steve?
Well, I will say, I mean, that almost catch, almost fumble from LZ. Obviously, I was a little disappointed to see that too, because as we talked about last week, he really seemed like he was primed for a breakthrough, and I thought that was going to maybe be, 2 steps back from the 1 step forward last week. He kind of got saved by the fact that he didn't catch it cleanly there, because I think if he would have caught it cleanly and hadn't let it go through his hands the first time, then that's a fumble. But in any case, I was really impressed though by his catches later in the game. He showed that he was ready for prime time later. I was really, really happy to see him come back strong there.
The other part that I thought was interesting today, and I got to bring this up because, folks, Kedrick does a lot of recruiting, obviously, for info for the Illini guys, as does Brad. And then when we get commitments, Steve Sturm gives a really nice breakdown on a player and what we can expect from him. And I got to say, when I heard Tanner Heckel is going to come and he's to Illinois, 5'11", 175 pounds, the 8-man player of the year in Kansas. People talked about, well, why are they getting this guy to come in here? And well, Brett Bielema thinks he can identify talent. Well, Brad, I'm thinking Brett Bielema can identify talent because there were 2 big plays made by the second-year player who many people thought was like, well, he'll be here for a year and then, transfer to somewhere like, Southern Illinois University or something like that and get some ball in. But Heckel he really contributed to the victory today.
No question. I think what you do is one of the best parts about a coach, obviously finding underrated talent, but then putting guys in position to succeed. And we've seen them do that. I mean, Justin Bowick, all he does is catch touchdowns, right? So we've got guys, they have certain things. You put them in a spot where they can be successful, and they've done that a little bit. I think Bielema is really good at finding some under-the-radar guys and figuring out. The one thing is, I don't think there's any doubt that he has a plan for every guy that he brings in. Like, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to use this guy. This way. It doesn't always work out. They have a plan. Obviously, they had a plan for Heckel. If I have a concern after this game, it's cornerback.
Yeah.
I felt like they let them get free. I thought they bit on the rollout play. They scouted and they know that Mensah likes to roll and then throw it downfield. And yet they still got caught looking in the backfield a few times. That's discipline and just being, and understanding the game plan. They got away with it today in a few cases, but I really think their corners have to be better. That's the only negative I have from this game. I thought everything else was pretty good.
Steve?
He's right. Cornerback is just a little bit of a weakness. We have perfectly good starters. It hurts that Jaheim Clark is out with a hamstring injury right now. Hopefully that will be remedied by the time the Indiana game comes around. Hopefully Caleb Patterson's okay. If he is and Jaheim Clark's back, obviously Xavier Scott can play out there when we need him to, and we have plenty of good safeties.
Yeah.
And we do have a couple of younger guys who are, worth a shot. Obviously, Tanner Heckel did a great job. I can say that I remember, of course, I wrote up an article about Tanner Heckel, just like everybody else. And I remember laughing at how ridiculous it was that he was even on the field against those, 8-man players in, small town Nebraska. But then I saw his actual measurements. I saw his speed times and track. And I saw that he was one of the fastest players in the entire state of Nebraska. And then I saw his basketball highlights and saw that he can get up with anybody at 5'11". And I'm like, well, I mean, if that kid was in Chicago and his skin color was dark, everybody'd be all over him. It's true. That guy can really fly. Like, he can jump, he can run. And if you had that guy, at 5'11", 175, in an area that is scouted more heavily, I don't care frankly, if he had mediocre film playing high school football, you'd probably still be recruiting him. So, I mean, hey, I love it when a guy comes out of nowhere, that you're not ready for and shows out. It was wonderful to see that he was the guy. First of all, I was impressed that he was the guy, because they do have a couple other guys. I love Vernon Woodward.
Yeah.
That guy's a stud. The only question is, his coverage isn't quite there, but that guy's a stud. You guys are going to love seeing him whenever he gets his chance to play on the field. Might be at safety, but when he gets his chance, you're going to love seeing him. So point being, Tanner Heckel didn't just get out there by default. He obviously beat those guys out, and I think we saw enough today to know that there's a reason why. So
yeah, and I think that INT was incredible, and I thought the way he was able to kind of keep an eye on the quarterback, which allowed him, I thought, just a split second quicker break on the ball. And I mean, some of these guys are just really talented on that side. The other guy that kind of jumped out to me, not that he missed a relatively wide open opportunity for a sack, but I thought number 9, Leon Lowry, was all over the place on defense. And I don't know. Did you guys notice him? Because like I said, I've noticed several times that he got free and went through and caused pressure, even though I don't know that he got a sack, but I thought he caused problems. Any thoughts on that one, Brad, or is that something that didn't jump out to you as much?
Well, I definitely noticed that he missed that sack, but
yeah.
but you have to get in there, and that's one of those things, like being able to pressure the quarterback. Obviously, breaking down, staying disciplined is the next part. But yeah, I thought he did some good things. I thought there were some good things from the defensive line overall in the second half. I thought they made some changes, some adjustments. They got some pressure, and I think had they remained a little more, had they remained disciplined on the outside, I think they would have really shut down Mensa for the most part. And obviously they made a couple plays. They had, Bailey forcing a fumble. We've already talked about Heckel's interception. They made some great plays, but I think this is a team that's still growing. I mean, I know they're veterans and they're old. I think they can get better. That's the scary part. They just won 45-19 in a game where they were favored by 2.5, but everybody picked against them. Against a Duke team that was receiving votes for the top 25, won 9 games last year. This is a quality team who paid $4 million for their quarterback, and they just went on the road and beat him, and honestly didn't play great. I thought the second half was good, really good. First half, they did not play great. And you still win by 26. That's got to be, I mean, we got to be thinking that's pretty good. This team has a great opportunity in front of them. And they did it on the road too. This wasn't a home game. Now, by the fourth quarter, it was a home game because all the Duke fans were gone. But
all 7 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they went to the parking lot to go chant overrated again.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a tough thing to do, and that's why they're older. That's why we like them down the road. That's why they have a good chance of winning at Indiana. I think that's going to be a great game, but I think they have a good chance of winning that game in Indiana.
Yeah, and I do think it was interesting because when I looked at our prediction, of course, folks, if you want to go to IlliniGuys.com, we have a few things that are behind the paywall, but one of the things we don't is our predictions because we want to put our fearless predictions out there. And I think the biggest spread that anybody had on this game was 10 points. I think was the most. I think that was Patrick and myself. And so, Ellen, I don't know how you don't say that this isn't quite a big win. I don't know that I see, and Ked, maybe you can give me your thoughts, but I think this Duke team is going to win 8 or 9 games this year.
Mike, I said that at halftime. I mean, if you remember, they're going to. You know, they shot themselves in the foot. They turned the ball over at crucial times. I mean, they just gave Illinois a few gifts. You shore that up, and it's a different game. I mean, if they don't turn the ball over at crucial times like that, and they're a part of the game, don't get me wrong, but I think they're a bold team. I love their defense. I said that in interviews before. I said it at halftime. I think they're a good football team, and it's hard for people to realize that because Duke is traditionally known for the basketball, but they're going to be, a force to reckon with, and they're not going to let teams walk in there or go on the road and not compete. So they paid $4 million for a quarterback that who was impressive. I mean, they took the loss today, but he also threw for 356 yards today. So I think, and their defense is good enough. And if you play defense, regardless of what sport you're playing, you're going to always have a chance to win. So I like I'm glad Illinois won. I'm glad it was a road game and it was on national TV and it wasn't, just locally with the Big Ten country. But it shows a lot to go on the road to win like that. And I think Duke expected to win. I really do. And they played like it. But late in the fourth quarter, they wore down.
Did you?
Yeah. And
question. Is this the biggest win or first double-digit road win since 2007 in a non-conference game?
Larry says it is. So I'm gonna go with Larry. I flipped through the press manual, the credentials, or the little book they give us, and I didn't see one pop out at me. So that doesn't mean that it's correct, but through a quick.
When's the last time they won a non-conference road game by that 26 points?
Yeah, well, that could be forever.
I mean, and this isn't a non-conference road game at like a team that's bad.
Right.
This is a non-conference road game against a team that was supposed to be good, and everybody picked them.
Don't you think that the guys who scheduled this game, both Duke and Illinois, when they scheduled, they go, these guys aren't any good. This will be an easy win.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it turned out that both teams are good. And I just, people know me, that they know I'll whine about everything. But I got to be honest with you. You look at what this team did at the half in terms of, the tweaks that were done. You got to say that while Manny Diaz is a young guy, he's just not Brett Bielema. And I think Bielema's got a staff together that they can put together some things. And then the team responds to the coaching and played very well. I got to think there's a differential advantage that Illinois has with the coaching staff at this point in time right now on the football field.
You're going full Charlie Weiss there, aren't you?
Yeah, I am.
We have a decided schematic advantage. Yeah,
well, right now, I will tell you one thing. I'd rather have Brett Bielema on my sideline than I would Bill Belichick if I'm coaching a college game. And
so far, he's been much more successful than Bill Belichick.
But especially,
although if I'm trying to find a 25-year-old, I would go with Bill Belichick.
I'm not gonna even get involved in that subject. But I will say one thing: when Belichick had to do the press conference and there were the little balloons in the background, I was like, "Wow, the girlfriend is making some decisions."
Yeah,
you guys are gonna pay for that.
So I will say I'm actually a big Manny Diaz fan, and I thought that the early game scheme showed that he really is for real. Like he really knows what he's doing, and he hired a good staff. I think the thing is that he is very early in his tenure there, and they brought in a whole ton of transfers because they had to. So they don't have quite the same. They don't have quite the same schematic advantage, I guess, because they don't have quite the same maturity and familiarity.
Which goes back to
right. I mean, Illinois is returning 18 starters, which is unheard of. It's a totally unfair advantage versus pretty much everybody they play, and I think that was a big part of it today. I will say I need to correct myself. Tanner Heckel is from Kansas. I was confusing him with Tanner Hollinger, who we recruited in the same year, who also played 8-man football from Nebraska. Not quite the same athlete. I don't quite have the same projection on him as I do from Tanner Heckel. But either way, that was the cause of my mistake there.
Kansas, not a huge difference. There was a Kansas-Nebraska axe, back in the 1850s, so it's the same thing. So no, Steve, I want to ask you a question real quick about Manny Diaz. I think Manny Diaz is really good at scheming, coordinating, things like that. I think the in-game part, would you agree? Maybe the in-game part isn't where Brett Bielema is yet. I mean, because he doesn't have that experience.
It was we talked about that before you came. Before you came in, I noticed huge differences in game, especially in the first half. Actually, it wasn't even halftime like we saw from Barry Lunny and Arian Henry early in their tenures at Illinois. I saw a bunch of differences. I saw us tightening up our gaps on offense and tightening up our gaps on defense too, which made it just a huge difference because that allowed us to. We brought tight ends right on the line of scrimmage very often, or had them coming in, motioning in to do wham blocks on the end of the line, and that allowed more double teams in the middle, which is kind of, it's a little bit unexpected as far as being able to clear out a lighter defensive front like Duke runs, but it was very effective actually. When you're playing a bunch of 240, 250 pounders on the end of the line of scrimmage, if you try to block them with 300 pounders, you're not going to be able to get guys in position as well as you'd like. So there was a ton of penetration. I don't know how, I guess Mike will probably be happy to hear about this. This reminded me a whole lot of the 90s Cowboy defense. You know how their defensive line was always undersized again and again and again, but they got penetration. And It didn't matter. And every single team tried to just run right at them, and it didn't work because they got penetration. That's what I saw there. It's just, honestly, like I keep saying, I mean, I hate to just be a broken record. Maybe we just put me on repeat here, Mike. We have experience. We have size. We have cohesion. And we have coaches who know their players better. And that's the unfair advantage that Illinois has right now. And hopefully that'll get us a lot more wins like today.
Hey, first from a coaching standpoint, you guys talk about the difference. There was a time that you saw on TV where they were trying to figure out, and I've always said this, Illinois gets the ball under 7 minutes to go in the game, and they're winning by a touchdown, the game is over. They were struggling how to stop them. Illinois was having success throwing the football, and they ran the ball for 2 or 3 yards, and they threw it for another first down. They couldn't figure out whether they should call timeout. You could clearly see them asking each other, should we call timeout? How do we get the ball back? That's coaching. That's veteran. That's what Brett Bielema does. That's Bielema football right there. You can clearly see. I can go back to games 3 and 4 years ago where they had the lead and they just don't give the ball back up to you. So that's going to come with age, for them. And I think that's one thing that Brett's very successful at.
Yeah, Brad, I know you got to run here for other social commitments. I think is an autograph signing at Rochester High School. But
hey, Hank and I are doing one there.
Yeah, exactly.
See how many I get, and see how many he gets.
Any final thoughts before you have to skedaddle?
Yeah, I put a tweet out talking about, or what is it, an X or still a tweet? If it's on X.
We'll call it a tweet because I don't want to say you put your X out.
Yeah. Okay, so I put a tweet out talking about Ted Lasso believe. I really feel like this was a believe game because there were a lot of fear. Illini fans were fearful of this game. Even if they thought they were winning, in the back of their head, there were a lot of them thinking, oh God, and all the pundits didn't believe. They thought, Duke's going to win this game. This is an easy win, easy bet, all these things. I really think this was a believe game. This is a game that showed what Illinois can be, and I feel like this could be kind of that could push them forward and get them there. I mean, I can't imagine, what this team, what it would be like if Illinois wins these next 4 games, I guess, before going into Ohio State and they're 6-0. That will be might be the best atmosphere at Illinois since what? The Penn State game when Penn State was number 1, something like that. I mean, it'll just be insane, and it should be just a blast. But I think, and the scary part for me right now is I really think they can do it. I really think they have the capability, the talent, the experience, and the coaching to get that done.
Yeah, totally agree. This is going to be an exciting season, and I think looking, I know there was a comment, somebody said 0 sacks in the second half. I think actually Illinois they were sacked 1 time. I think Altmaier got sacked 4 times in the first half. I think there was 1 in the second half, but I could be off on that. I think the interesting thing is this was a game that midway through the third quarter, you're thinking it's going to come down to holding off a team and be holding off a team and surviving, so to speak. And it turned into a 45-19 blowout. And I think the thing is when we talk about points off of turnovers, you had an Illinois team that really, not only did they get the turnovers, but they made Duke pay for those turnovers. That's always the part I think that's critical, because you see defenses do that and see what is going on there. So that's just my thought. Ked, any thoughts on the turnovers?
I'm not for sure, Mike. When I look at the stat sheet, which we have here, I don't think, unless it's wrong, I don't think Luke did get sacked in the second half. At least I'm not sure. But the turnovers, like you mentioned, I think that's going to be important moving forward. I was going to mention this earlier. If I had one disappointment, guys, this is me. The fact that they gave up 438 yards of offense, to me, I know there was adjustments in the second half. That's a concern for me. And I knew going into it, Coach Aaron Henry talked about having a scheme for Duke and what they had to try and defend. But that's an awful lot of yards to get up to me. And if you're going to be special and you want to, get to the playoffs and do what you think you're supposed to do, they're giving up 11 points on an average in 2 games, but I just like to see them not give up so many big plays. And you guys mentioned the cornerback plays, and I think they have to find ways to not fall asleep back there and give up plays. If I had one negative complaint, and this was a quality opponent, no disrespect to Western, that's a concern for me.
Yeah, well, and I do think, Steve, are we going to see? How do you rank Duke's quickness? Because I think that did take the Illini a little bit off guard, especially when you go from playing Western to Duke, and you throw a home field advantage, et cetera. But are we gonna? How do they rank speed wise? With the teams in the Big Ten?
Yeah, they play a totally different game than we're probably going to see in the Big Ten, and I don't mean that as a compliment, because I don't think they would survive. With those players at those weights in the Big Ten. There's a reason Illinois has a bunch of 315-pounders on their offensive line, and they've lined up a bunch of 300-pounders this year on their defensive line. But to answer your question, they do have well above average quickness. I wouldn't call them elite or anything like that, but they do have well above average quickness. That's clearly the type of team they've built. You could see it on offense too early in the game. Their wide receivers are smaller, and that was part of the reason they were able to get open in the outside zones. I saw that, and I saw a lot of quickness from their offensive line and their running backs early in the game too. That early game stretch where it looked like they were just going to be able to run the ball, and we just weren't even be able to get our hands fully on them because their running backs were just kind of like whirling dervishes there for a few minutes. That was frightening, and I was very worried about how this game was going to progress before Illinois tightened them up. And then one thing, Ked, we mentioned this last week. Illinois has built their defense this year on a much stronger and stouter defensive front, which is going to hopefully allow our linebackers to get out in coverage more. But we had to react early in the game and go back to kind of what we've done in past years, where we had to stack our linebackers behind the defensive line for the most part, which of course opens up those seam areas and those outside zones. You don't have quite the help out there that you'd like. Had to bring Matt Bailey, down into the box again and again, which he lived in the box last year, was basically an extra linebacker the whole time. We've been trying to get him out there, at least into the mid zones for the most part, but he was in the box again in order to try to stop that early offensive surge that Duke had. So hopefully when we play kind of real Big Ten football coming up soon, we'll see more of what the BLM coaching staff intended.
Oh yeah, and I did. I was reading the wrong line, so they're correct. There were no sacks in the second half. I was looking at instead of 4 sacks for 29 yards, which is what Luke took in the first half. I look a couple lines up, which was 5 turnovers, and they gave up 21 points. So there you are. So yeah, that is a good turnaround for the team. And I do think the one thing that I think, and Steve talked about it, sometimes when you play with quickness, disadvantage maybe for a period of time, some of the old fashioned things like cutting down your splits, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but it makes a big deal, and there are times that you do things like that make a difference in a game. The other thing is just looking down the stat sheet, for those people who are, heading, maybe you're out in a car or something between this and that, Illinois ended up at 419 yards versus Duke's 438. Passing yards, Illinois 296 to 356, and rushing yards 123 to 82. And like I said, I think Illinois was at negative 29 or 25 rushing yards at the half. So you saw a turnaround there. Illinois' penalties were 7 for 51, and Duke was 6 for 69. So when I look at that, you would like to see an older team cut down on the penalties a little bit. I think that's one thing that coach will probably give them a little bit of a talking to. But what I thought was really, really important, the 3 stats that I'm thinking Brett Bielema probably will like a lot, is in the red zone, Illinois was 5 for 5. So when you get down there, when you cash in with points, because remember how many times there were empty possessions, that first year when they struggled in the second half, that's not happening anymore. Illinois had the ball 36-12 to 23-48 for Duke. Well, that's what Brett loves in the second half, is watching those things happen. And then turnovers. I think Brett would take this any game, but 0 for Illinois and 5 for Duke. So those 3 stats, as you look at a stat line, are really that's really what you have that makes a huge, huge deal, and that's kind of a Brett Bielema plan.
His teams have always been that way. Take care of the football, don't turn it over. He is, like I've said it before, he's a masterful coach. He pays attention to the little details. If you remember today, the face mask in the first quarter, he started writing that down right away. And I've mentioned this on podcasts before, how some of those plays, and they scored, they got a field goal out of it. Maybe they don't get the 3 points out of that. But point being, he's just he's good at masterminding the game, and he's good in the moment. And he hires coaches that make those second half adjustments. I mean, right now, I think, I don't want to overanalyze this, but Illinois has a veteran football team. Steve mentioned that at the start of the broadcast. And they're playing like that, Mike. To not have turnovers like that, because you can't, and field position matters. You turn the ball over at the worst possible time, and the momentum changes. And what Illinois did the second half was they took Duke right out of the game. They didn't score on the first touchdown. On the next possession, Duke turns the ball over, Illinois scores. So it's just a really, really unique thing. And Brett's in his 5th year, I believe, 4th year. And he has depth now, players. He has a system. He has his system going. And probably the most unique thing I like about him, when he was at Wisconsin, it was all run. Never would they have thrown the ball like that in the second half the way Barry did today. But that's a coach, kind of like Brad Underwood and men's basketball. They're not 20 years old, but they're both, older gentlemen, and they'll adjust, and they've done that. And that's recruits resonate. That resonates with recruits.
Steve?
The depth. I was waiting for an opportunity to talk about the depth. We have depth that I've never seen in Illinois. I've been around a long time. I saw the Illini in the 80s when we had a lot of talent. The Ron Zook Illini in the early 2007, the John Makovic Illini, the 1 year good year where we built up a good team under Ron Turner. We've never had depth like this. When you think about how Dan Brown, we talked about it last week, how he's a true difference maker, just waiting for his chance, makes a stupid mistake, and then guess what? We have Leon Lowry, who barely played last week, made no impact whatsoever. But guess what? Leon Lowry is also an experienced and talented player who was just waiting his turn and all of a sudden he gets to play and he makes it. He's a difference maker today. I wouldn't call him a star or anything like that, but this is a guy who Illinois would have been thrilled to have and would have just put right into the starting lineup in past years. Now we have depth all over the place. When Dylan Rosiak, our team's defensive quarterback, the one player that you probably wouldn't want to ever take off the field, gets hurt. Well, guess what? Now we have James Krutz. Now we have Malachi Hood, who's, has gotten a little bit of seasoning last year and ready to play. Kenana Odeluga is a fifth-year senior who has played a lot, and you can put him in there. Not to mention JoJo Hayden, sneaking in there at different times too. I noticed they were playing him some off-ball linebacker today, which is maybe his best position. Depends on his size. But either way, having that kind of depth, Tanner Heckel coming off the bench. I mean, the fact that we're able to put Xavier Scott out at corner because we have Mackie Resetich, able to come in as a quality starter is amazing. Melvin Priestley goes out. Well, that's no problem. We have Des Schuster, who's also an experienced guy ready to come in. Josh Krutz, our center, again, kind of the quarterback, more or less. One of the leaders, at least in the offense, has to leave for a play. Well, it doesn't matter. We have TJ McMillan, who's also a very experienced player. He hasn't played a lot at Illinois, but he's a mature guy who's the son of a coach, ready to come in. Now he's been waiting his whole life for this, and you got him in a end goal situation, snapping the ball. I mean, how many teams can do that? It's a totally unfair advantage, based on the changing landscape, which allows us to roster well over 105 players, or sorry, not roster, but carry, let's just say, well over 105 players who are experienced and essentially on scholarship, under the new rules. We haven't seen that at Illinois. Brett Bielema has never been able to do something like that before either. I'm sure he would have, been anxious to do that at Arkansas or Wisconsin too, but the rules are different. So having depth like that creates an incredible advantage over past Illini teams. And experience depth we have that exists over pretty much anybody we're going to play this year. So,
yeah, and I was also looking. There's one stat that I don't know if you call it a stat, but the drive chart. Here's an interesting stat for the second half. Illinois, touchdown, touchdown, field goal, touchdown, touchdown, end of half. That's about the perfect drive chart you can get with the team as compared to what was going on for Duke, which was fumble, touchdown, interception, fumble, downs. So that is one that you look at, and again, there's a lot of reasons why that happened. But when you're talking about stats that the coach would like to see, that's a pretty good one. And I'll give it credit to guys executing better and coaches putting them in position to execute well, which I think is critical. And especially as Steve, as you talk about, I think those first two drives that Illinois had, I would not have bet a lot of money on Illinois being that good. And in fact, if it wasn't for that darn play going into the half with the sack, I would be thinking that would be touchdown. It could have been 3 touchdowns to end the first half and then do that. So I think the team definitely came up. So I just think that's a heck of a stat that you've got this opportunity here that the team went out and grabbed.
Yeah, no, it's impressive. Maturity, I mean, Illinois had wins like this last year too, where we started off slow, had adjustments. The veteran players, kept their heads in the game, didn't lose focus, and they came through. So we've seen this from this squad before, but we didn't see him run away from a good team on the road either. So yeah, this was a real statement win, I would say.
So
yeah, take them.
Yep, and so now going into next week, is Illinois going to have to worry about taking this team, taking this Western Michigan team for granted? Is there anything that anything that is there any, how do you as a coach after this type of victory, what do you do to prevent a trap here?
Oh man, that's always so tough to say. This is where to me, this is where the coaches really earn their money, getting teams ready to play.
Because where are they looking at right now, Steve?
What is who looking at?
Those Illinois players. What are they looking at right now in that schedule? They're looking at Indiana.
I mean, obviously they're looking at Indiana or USC.
Right.
I hope they're not looking past Indiana, because that's the sort of thing that an Illinois team might not, be ready for as well. Like a lot of these guys, of course, they saw Indiana do well last year, but they're used to Indiana being a walkover for most of their lives, if they followed college football. So I'd be worried about that too. But yeah, boy, it is tough to keep a team focused. We saw it last year with the Purdue game. Illinois was ready to just walk out, create some highlights, and walk back into the locker room last year. And of course, that's not what happened. Heck, a couple of years ago, Illinois came out against Toledo and needed a miracle play to win that game. I think that was the home opener. I can't remember if that was the first game of the year that year. We had come off a good year the year before, lost the bowl game, but still had come off a good year. And you wouldn't have expected us to be challenged by what was a good Toledo team, but still,
right.
They look at that name, they see Mac, and they expect to have, an easy day with a couple highlights and no bruises or bumps. And we were not ready to play that game. And I certainly hope that with more on the line, they wouldn't expect this. I will say this, I was talking about depth earlier. When you can pull out those starters and put in good reserves who are also experienced in waiting their turn, that changes the game just a little bit. It changes the landscape for those players just a little bit. So hopefully that's a difference versus what we've seen in the past. I will say also, like the evolution of college football has led to such different training and schematic advantages for the Big Ten teams versus the rest of the country, that it's an even more tilted field. We haven't really seen a MAC team have even a chance against a Big Ten team in the last 2 years. And
don't say that. Don't say that.
I'm knocking on wood, I guess. But when you see that Purdue, Minnesota are destroying MAC teams, whereas in past years, I think there was, in my lifetime, there was an 8-10 year period where a MAC team beat a Big Ten team every single year, which we haven't really seen that. Yeah, there was a time when that MAC game, that annual MAC game that every Big Ten team put on their schedule was dangerous, because those MAC teams they circle the Big Ten team on their calendar. They spend weeks preparing for that game, and whereas the Big Ten team was always had a bit of a letdown for the MAC game. Hopefully we're beyond that, speaking as a Big Ten team, but yeah, I don't know. Western Michigan's not that bad.
And we have Matt Stevens, who's just about to join us. He's coming back from the locker room, so that should be interesting to hear what Matt has to say. We can grab him in here in the next second or two. Trying to get a little bit of technical there we are. There's Matt.
So Western Michigan only lost to Michigan State 23-6 last week.
Yeah.
They're a dangerous opponent.
Yeah, let's not wish something into existence here. So we're just gonna say that they're gonna get all fired up. They're not gonna think about Indiana till Indiana week. Matt, you just got back from the locker room. Tell us a little bit about what you are. What the mood of the team is.
Well, I think that's the best 30 minutes of football, meaning the second half, that Brett Bielema has had at Illinois, and he's had some pretty good 30 minutes. But that's about as good a second half as you can have against a team that does not stink. I think everybody who we talk to is convinced that Duke's going to probably go bowling and win a decent amount of games this year. And they are aggressive on defense, and you can use that against them. But it was funny to me that Bielema talked about the adjustments that Barry made on offense, but I thought and then he caught himself and he said, you know what, we have a veteran team. And so these players made adjustments on their own without us having to really do anything. And we kind of adjusted to them and what was going well for them. And the thing that keeps going around in my mind is the idea that this is a veteran football team compared to everybody else, maybe in college football that they may see on their schedule. Like, this is a very, very veteran, old team that has a lot of experience and they kind of know what they're doing. And there isn't a whole lot of, wholesale changes that need to be made in the sense that, like, hey, what's working? Okay, well, let's go out and do that, and I think they feel like I feel like this team almost takes, some time to get going because they're kind of feeling out the opponent because they know that once they figure out what's working, they can just continue to keep going to that. It's kind of like a never ending search to figure out what's working. Right. And then they figured out on both sides of the ball. They were figuring out on defense. I thought the defensive game plan, except for the end of, obviously the end of the half execution wasn't very good, but I thought the defensive game plan was brilliant again. And it was very similar to what you saw, Aaron Henry do against Lenore Sellers in the bowl game. And then against Jaden Daniels in the Kansas game last year, which is, if Duke's going to score on us, they're going to have to go a long way, and they're going to have to do a lot of, it's going to be long drives. And I read something analytically this week. I can't remember where I wrote it. Otherwise, I'd credit that person. That this seems to be the defensive game plan du jour going forward, is that there's so much transfer portal going on. There's so much new players in college football as we enter this first month that making teams and making offenses go on long drives is probably the way to do it on defense, because if you make a team go on a long drive, there's a chance that there's going to be a screw up play by that offense because there's so many new pieces. It's not going to be 11 guys functioning as they're supposed to. And then you can get off the field. If you limit the explosive stuff and then make the offense make a mistake, that seems to be the way it's going. And I thought Aaron Henry, again, short of the end of the second half, the defensive game plan was pretty good. And then you've got guys that are veterans that are making really, really smart veteran type plays. I thought Luke Altmaier adjusted in the second half to what, Manny Diaz was throwing at him from an exotic blitzing standpoint, and just was like, okay, whatever we call, I need to get the ball out. I need to get it to either 80. I need to get it to 0 if we're close to the goal line, or I need to get it into a screen type situation. I just need to get the ball out. And I need to know where the ball is going. I don't really need to know what the play call really is. And I think that was a veteran move on his part as a quarterback. Hank Beatty's kind of become his Linus's safety blanket. If we need something, I need to get the ball to 80 as soon as possible on this play. And it usually works out pretty well. If they get near the end zone, I'm just going to throw something to 0 because Justin Bowick's probably going to catch it. And that's offensively kind of the way. And then I kind of looked over at one of my colleagues, and I think it was 13 or it was 14-6. And I said, well, how are they going to close this game out if they can't run the ball? And eventually it becomes a boxing match where we're going to run the ball. It's just a matter of how we do it. And they figured out in that fourth quarter how to close the game out. When it was still in doubt, not when it got silly, but when it was still in doubt, they did run the ball more effectively than they had in the first half. And, analytically, guys, this win's going to, I believe this win's going to look better and better because I don't think Duke stinks. And so when you look at it yes, they turned it over 5 times, and that's why the margin ends up being 45-19. But that 45-19, I know we got a long way to go here, but if Illinois is like a bubble playoff team, 45-19 at Duke's going to look pretty good, I think, compared to a lot of other teams as wins analytically. So just one of the best 30 minutes that Brett Bielema's team's put together on the road. And I just think this team is set up for this because of how old they are and how veteran they are and how much experience they have on both sides of the ball and who they're relying on.
31-6 second half spread on the road against a team that can move the ball and can put pressure on the quarterback is good. Did Bielema talk any about the adjustments they made at the half, or anything about his thoughts on at least on, if nothing else, the improved execution of his team in the second half?
Well, I think like Steve will probably nod his head on this, but when you get better offensive line play in the second half like they did, your play calls look a lot better. Like, and your drives look a lot better. And I thought interior-wise, they did a lot better job in the second half on the offensive line. And then Barry gets to open up and call a lot more things that he wants to call and get a little more creative if they're at least holding the line of scrimmage on the offensive line, which they weren't doing in the first half for a lot of reasons. I think Manny threw a lot of exotic stuff at Luke Altmaier and at Barry Lunny, and they needed to go in and figure out what's working and how do we use that aggressiveness against Duke. And once they figured out, okay, like it's almost like they shrink the playbook in the second half and go, this is working, this isn't. And then when they start to get momentum and confidence, then we get creative on like the, Hank Beatty, wild Hank, or, whatever we want to call it. Like, if then they can get creative and run that kind of stuff when they're on a roll. But I felt like that first drive coming out of halftime, they got help on the, there's 2 8s on a punt penalty. And then right after that, they went down and scored because like they had momentum. They could run the ball a little bit. There were things that Luke felt like he could get comfortable with. Like, again, if I run this slant to Hank Beatty, we're going to get at least 5 yards, and we're probably going to get more because he's going to win his one-on-one. He's probably going to break a tackle and all of those things. They just shrunk the playbook a little bit. Was like, hey, what's working? Let's get the ball out of Luke's hands and see if that works out well. It did. And then that allowed them. And then as Duke is trying to make an adjustment to, what Barry's in Illinois and Luke is doing, then they could get a lot more creative in what they did. And in the fourth quarter, they just basically like took a ball-peen hammer and beat them over the head with it with their run game, which is how Brett Bielema wants to close out a game. So I felt like, the second half adjustments, Barry's going to get a lot of credit for that, and rightfully so. But I thought veteran players like Hank Beatty and Luke Altmaier and guys on the offensive line. I mean, they've got so many returning starters and veterans and older guys on that offensive line are like, hey, this is what's working. This is what they're coming with. When Josh Kreutz can go to Luke and say, hey, this is the protections that are working if they run these, multiple these all-out blitzes. This is what we can do. I thought Thad Ward figured out which running back he can have on the field in which situation, meaning if I put a certain running back out on the field when Manny Diaz calls an all-out blitz, Luke's going to get killed. And so we have to have the right personnel out there. I thought early on, I said something to Terrence Jameson. I put it in our message board later on in the week that Illinois has figured out a loophole in the defensive substitution rule where they actually do a tag out with the nose tackle. And they got caught with it once, and Brett Bielema lost his mind. Duke lost their mind the rest of the game because they can't figure out why we can't snap the ball because they're literally – JMO has figured something out where like the nose tackle literally stays in his 4-point stance and gets tagged on the ass of the guy that's coming in, and he's coming in with like 11 seconds on the play clock. And so Mensa doesn't have any ability to change whatever they're doing based off of the way that Illinois has subbed at that point. And so they have figured out a loophole in the rule book that drove Manny Diaz absolutely out of his mind because he wanted to snap the ball and get 12 men on the field a couple of times. And he's at home and he ought to get those. And he didn't. So I think that their inability to adjust to what Illinois was doing on the fly on both sides of the ball caused the turnovers. I think that they were flustered in that regard. And anytime you win the turnover battle by 5, you ought to win by a margin that Illinois did. It's just a matter of how we got there.
They did that all last year. That was part of the South Carolina win in particular. South Carolina seemed to have not scouted us. I knew they've been doing that all year long. I mean, basically, if you change your offensive package at all, you should expect for an Illinois lineman to waddle on and off, a defensive lineman to waddle, and waddle's probably the wrong word, to slowly trot on and off the field with some sort of speed and eat up your entire play clock. That happened all last year. I can't believe the Duke wouldn't be ready for it.
So, yeah, Steve, except for the defensive nose tackle tag out is different now. Like they've always, like JMO's always subbed in the D lineman late, and you could see like the 3 guys running on the field late. You saw that against South Carolina. Now you see 2 guys and maybe an outside linebacker running on the field late. Mm-hmm. And then 5 seconds later, the nose tackle will then run out It's one guy
Okay.
that tags the guy on the ass, and then that guy runs off the field, and the umpire sits there on the football because he doesn't know what's going on, and that's why Illinois got the 5-yard penalty, because the referees got frustrated in the sense of like, no, like you don't get to sub twice, like you know what I mean, like, and so they were trying to figure out that. I do think Illinois eventually is going to get caught on that, especially on the road. I think they're going to get caught on that. I think they're going to finally go, hey, you can sub once when the offense subs. You don't get to sub twice. Like, I think they're risking it. And Manny was absolutely out of his mind on the sidelines. I watched him. It wasn't that they weren't prepared for it. Illinois is doing it differently than they did against South Carolina last year.
Okay.
Like,
well, yeah, I didn't see the tag out.
Right. And they ran it last week against Western, and I said something to JMO, and he goes, we're just, he goes, we're abiding by the rules. Like, but gave me that smile of like, yeah, we think we found something here. Like,
okay.
So I'm not
the
trying
letter, not the spirit.
Yeah, I'm not. Yes, I'm not. I'm trying to make a mountain out of a molehill because it's not the reason Duke lost. But I do think that Duke did lose their composure, and that's when the 5 turnovers happened. And so that's something that I think Illinois. Again, when you win the turnover battle by 5, you ought to win 45-19.
Oh yeah,
right. Always. Yeah. It's just a matter of how we got there, and I do think that. I was impressed by Illinois' ability early in the fourth quarter, being able to just run the ball down Duke's throat at that point and kind of salt the game away that way. And I do think that, I do think that everybody kind of underestimated Hank Beatty going into this season. Is that we all talked about guys like, Hudson Clement, who had a good game today, had a really, really good game today. We talked about the guys on the outside. We talked about Elsie. We talked about Hudson Clement. We talked about Colin Dixon. We talked about some other guys, Justin Bowick, especially after the game he had last week. Hank Beatty is the Linus safety blanket for Luke Altmaier. There are times in which, like last year, the ball had to go to 13 and it had to go to Pat. There are times this year the ball has to go to 80. And Luke knows it and knows. And again, you've got veteran guys that understand time and clock and space and where they are on the field. And this is a moment where we got to hit Hank with this. And again, it's a matter of having older guys, experienced guys. And I just think this Illinois team is set up to do what they did today, which is, Duke's got so many new guys on this team from their 9-win team last year. It's not like they brought a whole bunch of people back. They brought in a whole bunch of new pieces that they think are very, very talented. And I think they're going to win a lot of games, but Illinois has brought back so many guys that have chemistry with each other and that have played a lot of football and understand, what, 21 and 22 and 23-year-olds do. Duke's trying to do this with a lot of new pieces and quite frankly, a lot of younger pieces that don't exactly know the nuances of how to win a football game. And part of that is you can't give as many opportunities to Illinois, because it seemed like every time Duke gave an opportunity to Illinois took it and put points on the board with it. So that was how we got to the, margin that we got to. Yeah.
And St. Dominic's Rosary, of course, we all remember this person from basketball season, the ultimate of the glass half empty. The offensive line definitely, we've talked about that kind of extensively, some of the changes that were done and including, improved play as well, and some improved schematics.
Matt,
and
you're going to be surprised. I don't think the offensive line played better. Barry Lunny schemed it better. We brought in our tight ends. We were using our tight ends to overwhelm their edge players because Tanner Arkin and Christian Abney can handle those defensive ends by themselves. I'd noticed how light Duke's defensive line was across the board. All of their defensive tackles, 280, 290 at most. They have one 300-pounder on the roster, and he doesn't play. And so they're all undersized. And all their edge guys are all between 220 and 260. The guys who play are 240 and 260. And Tanner Arkin and Christian Abney can take those guys by themselves. So Illinois was actually double teaming up the middle a lot. And, it doesn't really matter that guy is quicker, than Geske. He's quicker than Henderson. He's quicker than, that guy across from him is quicker than J.C. Davis even, not to mention Melvin Priestley. But when you got a double team, he's not going to be able to get around that double team. And then, our guys are really good at combo blocks, and they were able to get to the second level a lot too. It was really all Barry Lunny. He saw the advantage and he took it with regard to our tight ends on their ends.
Yeah, I thought they blocked it up better in the second half. I really did. I thought it allowed Barry to go to some of the things he wanted to go to. But they were very caught off guard with what Manny wanted to do in the first half because they hadn't seen it on film, not only against Elon, but last year. And I thought the offensive line did improve over the 4 quarters of the game. I really did. I thought Kreutz, set the point of attack when they wanted to run the football. And I thought, the all-out Duke didn't get home as nearly as much as they did in that third quarter. And a lot of that is you had good blitz pick up by your running backs. Mm-hmm. And then you had good they were blitzing from guard to guard. Like they exposed Illinois from guard to guard. I mean, J.C. Davis got beat on that first one.
Right.
But they were exposing Illinois from guard to guard, and they didn't replace the guard, the center, or the guard. They just got better in the third quarter. They just did their job. And so it allows the wild Hank gets called because it gets blocked and goes for a touchdown because Hank doesn't get touched. Well, the reason Hank doesn't get touched is not because Barry Lunny drew up a brilliant play. It's because they blocked it up perfectly and Hank didn't get touched. Like if you block it up the way you're supposed to, Khalil Valentine can go for, 8, 12, sometimes 15 yards. If you block it up the way you're supposed to on 3rd and short, Caden Fagan can go for 4 yards. I thought you saw that in the third quarter. I thought you saw that late in the fourth quarter. Illinois believes, and I know a lot of people don't like this. First of all, as I always point out, Mike and Steve, there are 2 teams on the field, and neither of them suck. So, there are times in which Illinois is not going to have a winning play because Duke doesn't suck, and it's kind of outdated now, but everybody they're on scholarship too. They get paid too. They don't suck. They're a power conference program that doesn't suck. So sometimes they're going to win certain plays. I thought Illinois did a better job from a physicality standpoint and just here's how we can get it blocked up in the second half a little bit better. Also, if it's 3rd and 2 and you get 3.5, you won. I think there are a lot of plays that I deal with a lot of our subscribers, Mike and Steve, where they go, well, they only got 3 yards on that play. That play sucked. No, they got 3 yards on that play, and that's a win for Illinois. Because Duke lined up to try and stop that play for no gain. Illinois got 3 yards. And there are times where Illinois coaches watch the film and go, yeah, that could have gotten 10 if we'd have taken this, if he'd have made this cut. But it got 3, and that's we're writing that down as a W. And so. Yeah. I felt like the amount of negative plays that happened for Illinois in the second half were lessened, but I also felt like they had counters to getting out of 3rd down situations, even in the first half, that kind of allowed them to get points and allowed them to go in with a 1-point lead. And again, I think there are things that Barry Lunny just kind of feels his way out in the first 15 minutes and goes okay, this is going to work. And then you see that big Waffle House sheet that offensive coordinators that. Yeah. Well, we can just cross all of this out and we're just going to run this stuff until they stop us. And sure enough, usually in games, especially at this level, they don't get stopped. And there's a reason why, because we're trying to stop the other stuff that they're not going to call anymore. So I thought Illinois acted like a veteran team, and these coaches acted like they'd been around each other for 3 years. Mm-hmm. And at Brett Bielema, I mentioned it to him after the game. He talks all the time, guys, especially at this level, games are lost more than they're won. Well, I felt like Duke lost this game, and Illinois, every time they got a gift, they took that gift, and then they put points on the board based off of that gift. And that's what veteran, solid teams do at this level, and then tomorrow on Sundays too. And I thought Illinois kind of showcased to you what a veteran, solidly fundamental coached team looked like today, and that's why it's 45-19 on the road.
So if we're talking about, Matt and I sometimes end up arguing. If we're talking about the same I think it was a 3rd and 2 near the goal line, we actually ran 2 double teams on their defensive end and defensive tackle at the same time. It was a tackle guard double team and a guard center double team right up the middle. I mean, you can't normally do that unless you have the tight end who can handle everybody else there too. That was just too easy.
Manny's defense though doesn't. I mean, I've covered Manny's defense for 50. I know it by heart. I opened my career in 2009 covering Manny Diaz's defense at Mississippi State.
He's good.
He recruits defensive ends that are 230 pounds that can go around the edge and go get the quarterback. Like he recruits 290-pound defensive tackles that can get vertically up the field. His big thing is being able to play man on the outside and having a whole bunch of speed. And that's where I think Illinois got a little confused, is that, you know, we're not getting overpowered. We're getting overwhelmed by the speed and the athleticism of Duke's defense. And I think that they made an adjustment in the second half of, well, if we get the ball out of Luke's hands really, really quick, or we get the ball into the hand of a running back really, really quickly, and we don't run these long-winded running plays, then we're going to be fine. And I think that was the adjustment that kind of led to the third quarter explosion.
So we got to start wrapping this up in the next 3 or 4 minutes here, but I did want to ask one question.
Sure.
I didn't see Aiden Lowry out very much in the second half. Was that just because the other guys were playing a little better on pass protection, or was that a tweak, or what was your thoughts?
So on the ride of the elevator ride back up here from the postgame, which is a 200-yard walk to their football facility through 2 of their grass practice fields, Aiden Lawfrey's dad was in the elevator with us. He tweaked his ankle, and they just decided to go to 5. And Bielema mentioned it in the postgame. You guys will see it in the video where he kind of screamed at Thad Ward, "Hey, where's Aiden? Like, we need to go back to Aiden." And Thad's like, "We can't. Like, he's got an ankle the size of a watermelon right now." Like, and so I think it'll be fine, especially by Indiana. But yeah, they were doing so well with 5, the combination of 5 and 3, that they were going to let Aiden Lawfrey rest the ankle. And yeah, he tweaked the ankle in the first half and just wasn't the same going into halftime. And they just thought he was going to be an emergency option if they had to go to him in the second half.
Okay. So just to wrap it up, folks, this has been a heck of a game here, and we are going to go and head out of here. We got to get out of the studio before we get kicked off of YouTube, but we will be back. I've got a preview with the Western Michigan play-by-play man, I believe. Will talk to us a little bit about what Illinois will be facing, a team that, at least gave Michigan State a little bit of run for the money. So it's not going to be quite a laydown game. They're no Kennesaw State. And then, of course, later on in the week, we will be back with our coverage post-game and halftime. And we might even unveil a pregame. We'll see. But we're looking at that as well. But we're looking, the Illini coming off a 45-19 victory on a game that most people thought would be within a field goal. Seems like quite a victory, and Illinois goes, into the record books with the biggest wins since 2007 on the road, maybe even going all the way back to 2001, which people remember Illinois ending up in the Sugar Bowl. And, of course, we are seeing an Illinois team that in the second half went touchdown, touchdown, field goal, touchdown, touchdown, and then put the ball down on a knee. So that's if Brett Bielema had ever had a romantic football game, this would be it. So, folks, until next time, go Illini.